Hey there viewers, Vanessa O here. Got a new project today. We've had this 2001 GMC Jimmy towed in. It is a no start but cranks okay. Customer didn't know a whole lot about it. He just picked the car up used. It's been sitting for a while. He does know that. He put a battery in it, cranked it dead a couple times, has fiddled around with some things, doesn't know why it doesn't run. He initially thought there were some problems with the security system or something of that nature. I don't believe that's the case. The security light is not on or flashing, so that's a good thing. I can hear the fuel pump running. Doesn't mean it has pressure, or doesn't mean it even has any gas in it, but we're gonna look this over. I'm gonna pull some codes out of it, see if there's anything there that'll give us a quick clue. If not, we will move on to some basic no start, cranks okay preliminary checks. All right, well, I hooked the battery charger to it. Get this thing so it'll crank over a little bit better. It's only about 8 degrees right now, so it cranks a little slow and the battery's a little low. At any rate, I did pull codes out of it. There is no codes. I kind of expected that though. The battery's been dead and replaced, so none of the monitors are set. I just did a couple things while I had the scanner plugged in, made sure the sensors were looking like they're reading appropriately, like coolant temp sensor and mass airflow, and checked to make sure the crank sensor was working, seeing if it had RPM signal while I was cranking it. Just a couple real quick things you can do. So now we're just going to move on and check the basics. The engine sounds like it has good compression when it cranks over. It doesn't sound like a timing issue. It's not backfiring out the intake. It's not even really attempting to do anything. So the ignition coil is right up on top of this engine. So before we go messing with any fuel components, I'm just going to check real quick, see if it has spark. If it does, we'll move on to injector pulse and fuel pressure. If it does not, well, we'll just start there, because whatever's causing the no spark or condition is probably causing the rest of the problems. But let's just stop assuming and go have a look. So we're under the hood here, and as I mentioned, this is the ignition coil. It's right on top. It's easy to get to. I have our spark tester just stuck down in there. I have it grounded to the engine block. We're going to crank it over, see if it sparks. You might wonder why I'm not using the ignition coil wire as the ground. Well, what if that wire's bad? That could show up as a no spark. So we're going to ground it, make sure the coil's good or not good, and go from there. You can go ahead and crank it, Randy. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Do that again. Okay. Just crank it and then let off the key. Huh. Well, that's pretty interesting. We can see it only sparks when we stop cranking. So that was pretty interesting to see this thing crank over but only spark when you let off the key. I think I'm going to just stop right here, and we're going to check the coil for power to see if we're losing power or signal to the coil intermittently. Something's got to be happening there. I don't see any sense at this point checking fuel pressure and injector pulse and all that baloney. So grab my ordinary test light. I'm going to zoom in here for you a little bit so you can see what's happening. Just going to hook this to a ground. Just ground on the alternator case. It works okay. We turn the key on, Vanessa. Now with the key on, theoretically we should have power on one of these wires. And we do. So let's see if we're going to lose our power when we crank. Go ahead and crank it. Okay. Do that again. Okay. So that's a pretty neat problem. Only have spark when we let off the key. Kind of unusual. And we were able to make a pretty speedy diagnosis of that and see that we're losing power to the coil. I did not check the signal side of it because, well, frankly, because we're losing power there. So let's focus on that first. Going to get on the internet here. We're going to find a wiring diagram, see where that power from the coil is originated from, see where it comes from, kind of trace this backwards and see if we can't find an answer. Not real sure right now, but let's have a look. So here we go. Here is the ignition coil right up in this area. We can see the wire that we tested on it. The pink wire is the full-time power. And then we have the signal wire that comes from the ignition control module. So let's trace this backwards. This comes down here, goes on to the next diagram, number 5. and number 6. Here's 5 and 6. That goes along to the next diagram, the number 1 and number 2. And they come around here and they go up to a fuse. Looks like ECM1 fuse. It's a 15 amp fuse in the underhood fuse box. That powers the ignition coil. Looks like all of the fuel injectors. And that continues on over here, number 5. And it also powers the PCM. So let's go back and check this fuse. According to the wiring diagram, it should be in this fuse box here under the hood. It's on here good. Let's see. Here it is. ECM1. It's a 15 amp fuse. So it's this fuse here. Just going to use a test light again. It's a non-computerized circuit, so I'm not too awful worried about it. According to the diagram, we should have power here, key on, engine off, and key on, engine cranking. Turn the key on, Vanessa. Yeah, we know that this should be good because we had power at the coil, so let's see if we're losing power here. Go ahead and crank it. Okay. Yeah, look at that. Do that again. Okay. Yeah, so this should stay active or stay at full voltage when we're cranking it, which it is not. So theoretically, if we apply power to this PCM fuse or ECM fuse 1, that powers the injectors, the ignition coil, it should start, assuming everything else is good. So I have a jumper wire hooked to the battery, obviously. I'm going to turn the key on, we're going to power up this fuse and crank it over. Let's go ahead and turn the key on, Vanessa. Now this is going to maintain a 12 volts at this. Okay, go ahead and crank it. Back over here at the computer, we're going to look at that power distribution diagram here and see what feeds that ECM fuse. My suspicion is it's probably the ignition switch. All I know is we provide power to the ECM fuse, the vehicle starts and runs. That tells me everything else is in good order. So let's trace it backwards, see where that power comes from, and we'll continue on tracing that out and do a little bit more testing here and see what we find. So I found our power distribution wiring diagram, and we can see right here is the ECM1 fuse, the one that we're lacking power from. So it doesn't take long to follow that wire down, and like I suspected, it comes right from the ignition switch. So the next step is going to be go right to the ignition switch, find this pink wire, verify it there, and the other thing we're going to want to verify is this fuse here, this ignition A fuse, this 40 amp fuse, to make sure that is staying powered at full times. I assume it is because the vehicle continues to run. I don't suspect there are any problems there, but it'll only take a second to test that because that is what feeds this wire. So assuming the feed to the ignition switch is good, I suspect that we're losing this wire here on the way out. So with that being said, I'm going to take a big fat guess and say it's the ignition switch, but instead of doing a big fat guess, we're going to test it. And if that's the case, this video is going to turn into how to replace the ignition switch in your GMC Jimmy. So it's lunchtime, I'm going to lunch. Stay tuned, I'll be back in just a few seconds. So this is inside the vehicle. This is the lower trim panel, little hush panel. It goes down by the brake and gas pedal. We're gonna come up under the dash here. This is the main connector for the ignition switch. And as we saw in the wiring diagram on cavity B1, we have this red wire, which should be a full-time power, which we have. So we're gonna crank it and make sure that power is maintained, which I suspect it is. So let's go ahead and crank it over. Okay, we can see that power is maintained like it's supposed to be. And the next one we have to get to is the pink wire. So let's see if we can move our test light here. There's our pink wire, kind of hard to see on the video, but that is in cavity number C5. That is our pink wire. That should be powered with the key on. So we're going to turn the key on. It's just like, this is the same wire that runs our fuse out there, if you remember from the wire diagram, and this is the one that should maintain power when we crank. So we're going to try that. Okay. And you can see that it does not. So that confirms it. It is an ignition switch. We need a new one, so let's get one ordered. Alright viewers, you can see that we made a 100% conclusive diagnosis of the ignition switch. Pretty suspicious of that when we were at the fuse box, to be honest with you, but we like to be 100% certain if we can, and we are now. So as I stated, I ordered an ignition switch from Advance Auto. They sent me this. It appears that somebody sat on the box. I'm not really sure. This thing has been, they might have, like, you know, chewed the corner off it. It's been all taped together. I opened it up. It's really no better than the one we have. It's been installed, might even be used, I don't know. I'm not gonna take the chance, so I ordered a new one for tomorrow. I'm gonna end this video just as a diagnostics video, and I will put a link in the description below to show you the actual procedure of replacing the ignition switch if you so happen to come across this. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give us the thumbs up if you did. Give us a thumbs down if you didn't. Leave any questions or comments you have below. We'll try to answer your questions as soon as I can. And please subscribe to our channel. You can just click this little red box right here. And please like us on Facebook. So, thanks for watching.